Welcome back everyone. So we'll talk briefly about the literature review and finding research idea. The literature review is an essential part of the research project and a good one will really make your paper good. So let's start. Literature is what it means by literature is what has been published previously, so previously published studies. So review, well, it's self-explanatory. So you want to go over the previously published study, whether in the same specialty you're interested in or in the same topic that you want to do a project on. So why do we want to do it, or why should we do it? So a strong literature review means strong methodology leads to a strong paper. So if you go over previously published articles in the same idea that you want to do, you can see what they did correctly and what they did wrong and what was the mistake that they did and the limitation. So in order to minimize them and remove them, in order to have a good plan for your research, to have a good paper. So where can you start? So this is controversial, but I would recommend Google. Most researchers, they do not acknowledge Google and they just go straight to PubMed. However, if you add the term NCBI, it will show you relevant articles that are PubMed indexed to really be efficient and not just to find things that are specific and relevant to your study idea. So PubMed is a really great engine and all researchers almost they use it and it's really good and it has some features. So it has the cited by and references features. If you look into an article and you find it similar to your study idea, you can find studies that have cited this paper as well as the references of this paper to go over them and benefit from them when you're designing your study. So there's also, I think, something called suggestions or similar articles in PubMed. We'll go over them in a minute. So you want to read the abstract and the methods initially in order to be efficient. So we usually don't read the entire article. We just read the abstract and if it's interesting to us, then we can read the method section to design our methodology. So instead of just doing the theoretical part of this, let's do a practical example so you can learn. So let's go to Google. So we want to, for example, we have a research idea to assess medical students' attitude towards research. So look it up. We have already added the term NCBI here. So okay, click on this. A medical student interested in research. So this is similar to our research idea. You want to read the abstract if possible, and also similar articles. So these are similar articles of the study. Experience, attitude, and understanding of research among medical. So this is also similar to what we want to do. Perceived barriers. This might not be similar. UK medical student attitude towards their future career, not relevant to our idea. So this is for similar articles, and this is for cited by. These are papers that have cited this paper that we're interested in. However, if you read the titles, they're not relevant. So you can also look into the references. Here there are almost 33 references and you can go over the titles if you're interested. However, they're not all relevant. So first of all, in order to do a literature review, you want to download those articles. So here in the PDF. So this is similar to the idea that we want to do, and you want to download this file. So I have already created a file called the LR or the literature review. Click on it and download. And now what you want to do is you want to collect several studies. So typically for doing a literature review between 5 to 15 or even up to 20, nothing more. In order to do the literature review, it can take a while. It can take up to a few hours. So let's look into other studies as well. So look into the references. So it mentions here attitudes of Saudi Arabian undergraduate medical students toward research. This might be interesting. Okay, so this is similar to the idea. You can read the abstract. Find the full text, then you want to download it. So you can also go through the similar articles if there's anything similar cited by, if there's also anything similar to the so how do medical students perceive their research experience and associated challenges. This might be an interesting paper. Again, you can read the abstract, download the PDF. Sometimes you may not find the PDF in full, so you can just try to find other studies. That's okay. Again, you can find similar things here, similar articles and references. Barriers experienced by medical students. This is similar to our idea. So again, you would just go on and you would download, for example, 7 to 15 up maximum of 20 articles. I wouldn't recommend doing more than that. So you can also check out other articles that are found here, for example, toward research and career. Anyway, so you would go over them one by one, and again, you would collect a specific number. So let's go over the study that we found. So let's say you have collected 5 to 15 or up to 20, and now you want to go over them. You're usually collecting the PDFs in order to help your fellow co-authors write the section, as well as to design your study methodology. So let's go over here. You can here read in the abstract. So we want to know what is the study design. They use a cross-section study design here. It was carried out among medical students. This is the College of Medicine, King Saud University in Riyadh. So they use a web-based survey. This is the section that they use: demographic, data, attitudes towards science and research, perceived barriers, medical students, research practice and experience. Then this is the result that they found as well. You can go over it and you can find the conclusion that they want. If you find this interesting, you can go again to the material and method section to go into detail about what did they use exactly. So they mentioned here a little bit more detail. So the target population is about 1,450 students. The sample size was calculated to be 365. So you can go over this and try to decide what to do with your study as well. So if they use a questionnaire, you would use a questionnaire. So they use a questionnaire content that was adopted from previously similar study after comprehensive literature review, and they mentioned the study that they used to create their questionnaires as well. So there are so many details, so I would recommend first reading the abstract, then reading the method section. So you would do the same thing for each article that you find when you design the study, not necessarily when you write the paper, okay? Here are the methods: observational cross-sectional survey, 2 public medical university in Pakistan, February, they mentioned the time. They included 3rd to 5th year medical students that were invited. 700 agreed to respond. A self-administered question was structured, a pilot project. So many details will go into method. This will help you understand how to design your study paper as well. So let's go back. Aside from doing it on Google, you can do it on PubMed. So let's check out PubMed, for example, here. Advanced. Let's write, for example, medical students. You can use the MISH terms. However, I'll use all the field for clarification. Add to history. These are all the top articles that mention medical students. Let's say research. Add to history. Add them together. Add to history. So there are so many articles, so you want to narrow it down a little bit. So let's add the term attitudes, for example. Okay, let's see. It narrows it a little bit and we want to narrow it more. So let's say in Saudi Arabia, for example, to make it more specific to your paper. Again, this is not the most systemic, I would say, manner, but this is just an example. To history. So here we try to narrow it down to 300 articles. Let's go over them. So awareness and hour toward epilepsy among medical students. So this is not specific to our paper. Motivators and barriers to research participation among medical. So this might be similar to our idea. Let's click on it. So again, this is the abstract here. You can go over them. Perceived barriers toward participation in undergraduate research. So these are all similar to the idea that we were trying to do. Perception of preclinical medicine toward extracurricular activities and so on. So again, this is how to do a literature review using Google as well as PubMed. So now you know how to do a literature review, but how can you find research ideas to begin with? So literature review, you need to be specific to your field of interest. So you would do the same literature review, however, to a specific field of your interest, for example. So also you can look up journals, you can look up whatever specialty you're interested in. So you can mention, for example, I'm interested in ENT, so you would write ENT journals, then you would try to see what are the articles that has been published, and if there's any available or any new research idea that hasn't been conducted before. Mentor is also a great way. So for example, I have worked with some ENT fellows, and usually fellows in general, they would have more research idea since they're sub-specializing in a specific field, and that field may not have a huge or expansive research or literature. So they know much more about what hasn't been done in that field, and they would have many ideas. You can also ask residents and consultants and faculty members if they have any research idea or they have something in mind that they haven't been able to conduct or work on. Conferences is also relatively a good way of finding research idea, because in conferences, once someone is finished with the research project, they already have a few questions that has been left unanswered. So you want to know what are the things that they haven't answered or they did not know exactly why in order to do a paper about it. So sometimes you can read about the topic in a medical textbook and they will tell you, or you will read something like this is up to the debate, or this is an area of research. So you can go over it and see if you can do a paper about it. So also you need to assess if it's feasible or not. So sometimes you want to do something assessing, for example, opinions and attitudes are actually simple if you do a cross-sectional survey-based study. A retrospective study, you can also try to see if there's any association between a condition and a medication. However, if you want to assess some kind of intervention, this might not be feasible. So ask yourself, can I answer my research question with a study design that I can do in a matter of months or even up to a year or not? So we need to understand that it's doable. Sometimes you would have, for example, 10,000 medical records, and this is a very huge number of medical records, and each one would have, for example, 30 to 50 variables. So this might not be doable, or it may take much more time than you want. So again, do the literature review and see, are there any previous studies? So for this idea that I've mentioned, there are so many previous studies. So you want to go over them and see what you can add new. Sometimes when you have a research idea and you don't have many studies or a limited number of studies, this can be all good and bad. Good because you're adding something new, and bad because you can't rely much or you can't use previous paper to design your methodology. So sample size is also a very important aspect. The sample size is the number of participants you want to have in your study. Some studies that have been published previously would have a small sample size, so for example 50 to 100. However, in your hospital or your university, you have, for example, 300 medical records from this condition. So a larger sample size, meaning you're adding something new, you're adding a more strong clinical conclusion. So can you add something new? In research, I think it's really important to ask yourself, can I add something new? Is there anything novel with my paper? Sometimes you would have some novelty if you add two ideas together. So I remember in one of my first papers, I wanted to ask what did students think about research, but this, I thought it was a very common idea. So then I wanted to ask, okay, why are students doing research? I have already found two separate papers that assess those two topics separately. But once I added them together, it added some novelty to my project. So you should always ask yourself, okay, how can I be novel? How can I add something new? Because novelty is very important in research in general, as well as it helps with publication. So also let's do a practical example again. So let's go over the paper that we saw previously. So most articles, when you publish an article, most journals and most research checklists, they would require you to write a recommendation. So when someone is reading your paper, they can find a research idea. So let's see if the study has included this or not. It usually can be in the conclusion section, or it can be in the end of the discussion section. Randomly, let's see if there's any future recommendation. Good response. So they mentioned here it was limited to being a cross-sectional study in a single center. So you can do the same study but do it in two universities. For example, you can do it in your local university, and if you know a friend from a different city, you can include them and do it in two universities and call it a two-center study. Questionnaire based. So they mentioned here that a national multi-college mixed type of study, including qualitative evaluation for both medical student and supervisor, could give a better understanding of factors that can improve research experience among medical students. So they mentioned here nationally, you can do a paper that includes several colleges. You can include both students and supervisor to be more creative and novel, to give a more understanding about their experience. So this is a recommendation right here. Let's check out other studies. Okay, let's go back. Let's go to the conclusion. Okay. So here they already made a suggestion. We suggest no, this is regarding the conclusion. Okay. Mentoring. So they did not make here any future recommendation. So sometimes you would find it and sometimes you wouldn't. However, most paper you would find it. Let's see here to this paper. Okay. We propose the regulate curriculum. So sometimes they would make conclusions that are based on their study, and sometimes they would make future recommendation to help you add to your study design. So I don't think they have included it here as well. Okay. Let's go to the other paper. Again, go to the conclusion. Oh. Surveyed, but aware of importance. 4 main barriers to research, but time constraint, lack of mentorship, inadequate training. Okay. So they mentioned here, further studies are recommended to survey the attitudes of students from all medical schools. So again, a national study. Despite these limitations, it's important to note that participant response to the anonymous survey used in the current study may have been more honest than those from other research utilizing different methods. So again, you can find different recommendations. So this is how to find research ideas in general. I hope you find this helpful, and best of luck.